So I finally put together the decks that I wanted to play, and I've recently been playing Weiss Schwarz for the past 2 months, and I just wanted to share my experience on what it feels like to be a new player in a game that's been around for almost 10 years, and also how my decks fared when it comes to playing other people as well. I gotta be honest though, if I were to grade myself and say what kind of character I would be in a tier list when it comes to something like Yu-Gi-Oh, I would probably be a nobody like this guy in the background here, who absolutely sucks at card games. The first thing I just gotta say is, if you're looking for people to play this game with, I got bad news for you. In general, the game of Weiss Schwarz is very niche unless you live near certain communities. So if you're looking for people to play, you're probably shit out of luck if you're looking to play in person. Most likely, you're going to have to look for people to play with online through Webcam. And aside from the game being an absolute barren wasteland when it comes to trying to find people to play this game with physically in person, you'll also find it very hard to find people with actual good quality cameras when it comes to playing this game. If you look to play with games online with people, most likely you'll see people using laptop cameras or these like potato ass camera qualities from like, I don't know, like the 1990s or something. So if you want an idea on how to actually have a good webcam setup to play up online, it's very cheap and you actually don't need anything special, right? So first, you probably just want any sort of stand for your camera pretty much, which is going to be your phone. And you could buy one for like, I don't know, like $10, $20. And it's really not hard to set up. You just clip them onto your desk and then you go from there. And then going back to the idea of how to get a good quality image with a webcam, right? You pretty much just use your camera phone, which is your iPhone, your Android, or whatever it is. That camera quality is probably way better than whatever webcam you're gonna buy, because just to let you know, a 1080p webcam is actually not that great unless you get a really good quality one. As compared to your phone, you probably be able to take like 4K pictures with your camera phone, and the quality is way higher and it has better programming and whatnot. And pretty much what you do is you just download free programs, like this one's from Elgato called Epoch Cam, and there's free versions of it. I think the free version has like some kind of marker on the actual video, but on the actual non-free version, which you just pay $8 for, you're able to use your phone as a webcam, and then you'll be able to play on Discord, and the camera quality is way better rather than whatever potato ass camera that's like blurry that people are using from like their webcams from like 10 years ago. There's one gripe that I kind of feel like I do have when it comes to playing Weiss Schwarz. I know a lot of areas and locals, a lot of people do play Japanese decks, and honestly, I'm not a really competitive person. I'm not gonna try hard and actually double check people on like what their cards do. But I just want to point out one thing where, you know what, when you're playing with new players, it might be kind of a turnoff in regards to people playing against Japanese decks, especially if, you know, new players might only play English, as well as the fact that I just want to mention that, you know what, even though I played my deck so many times, there's still certain interactions that I have to reread. Even my opponent is just like, oh, let's just make sure that the cards work out the way that they do. But one thing you'll encounter when you play a lot of these people that play Japanese decks is that they don't print out translations onto their cards, right? So you're just assuming your opponent knows what their card interactions do. And the one nuance to this is that I'm going to point out when I go over my Lion King deck is that, you know, the same people will probably go over your cards and go like, oh, is that really what it does? Let's just read it again just to make sure that you're doing the interaction correctly. But at the same time, if they don't print out translations for their own cards, which are in Japanese, I'm going to assume most people do not read Japanese, do not speak Japanese. I'm sure there's some people that do and understand their cards completely, right? But you're just assuming that they understand all these interactions, and for all you know, maybe they're doing it completely incorrectly and you wouldn't even know as someone that's playing with other people. So the problem is you might actually go run into a local scene where maybe all they do is play Japanese, and as a new player, you're just like, well, I guess that's what their cards do and it is what it is. And I'm going to assume to a certain degree, as new players, they might not have as much fun as compared to going like, oh, okay, can I just see what that card does, as opposed to just like, well, no one can read it and I guess I'm just going to assume whatever you tell me, that's what it does. Like, can you imagine as someone that's trying to be new in a hobby and trying to get into playing a card game, you're just looking at a wall of text like this and you're just like, what the fuck is that? And what does any of that mean? And well, I'll just take your word for it, and that's what it does, right? And since there's so much kanji on there, you're just gonna assume your opponent knows exactly every single card that has this wall of text. They know what it means. Of course, there's common words that they're gonna understand, and if they played the deck a lot of times, I'm not saying everyone doesn't understand it, right? But out of all the people that play this game, you could probably guess that there's probably a lot of people that don't actually know the small nuances to a lot of these effects, and maybe some of these effects might not apply to everything that they think it applies to, no matter what they're assuming, right? Because sometimes translations could be wrong as well too on certain websites. So, and you'll notice it once you start playing the game as well too. If you start reading your own cards in English, you could reread the same card multiple times, and you're still gonna go like, all right, let me just clarify what it does, because there's a difference between how things are worded, right? And if there's certain complications when it comes to understanding how effects work in English, how are you gonna assume that a majority of the population knows Japanese well enough to know the small nuances and details in regards to how the wording works and how specifically it applies to 50 different cards in their deck? And I'm sure there's some guy out there that goes like, oh, I read all my cards and I know specifically the translations. I've been playing my deck for like 15 years or whatever it is. But for every guy that knows it exactly what it is and is going to be, fair to their opponents, at the same time, how about all the other guys that just have absolutely no clue what they're doing and just, okay, that's roughly the effect and that's how they remember it. If you played any card game, you'll know that even if effects are in English and people understand English as their first language, the reason why there's judges, the reason why there's a lot of these people asking about ruling and realize, oh, hey, when I played with my friend, it was like this, but then when I went to play with someone else, they told me it's different. The fact that there's things like this in trading card games adds that extra layer of bullshit that you have to deal with when you're playing someone with a Japanese deck when they don't even understand Japanese at all, and they're just going to assume pretty much what the effects are based on what they think it is. But I would say overall, as compared to a game like Yu-Gi-Oh!, I do find Weiss a lot more casual friendly. Not that the game doesn't have its own nuances where it can be complicated and there's like a certain level of skill involved in it. I would say a game like Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a lot more oppressive. And oppressive, what I mean is that you could play cards that completely dominate a board, and pretty much the goal of the game could end up being that you're trying to make it as anti-fun for your opponent as possible. And where there's a lot of cards that just become staple cards no matter what kind of deck that you're running, where you don't really run into that problem when it comes to playing Weiss, because certain cards are locked into certain series pretty much. So you can't play like an Attack on Titan cards with a Fairy Tail deck, for example. Of course, there's like common effects like brainstorming and whatnot, but overall, I would say it's not as oppressive as certain card games where your goal of the game is pretty much in a game like Yu-Gi-Oh! Whereas you're trying to shut out your opponent and just like cancel whatever they can possibly do from their hand, and you're playing things like hand traps and just negates, and you're pretty much just clearing the whole board and board controlling. And a lot of that could be very, very uninviting to new players and people that are just looking to casually play and have fun. But I just want to put it out there that if you're just looking to play the game to have fun, and you're looking to think that, oh, I'm going to play like a super old deck like this guy, or one of those sets that came out like a bajillion years ago, you're probably going to end up having a bad time, because the power creep is just there. And a lot of these older sets are just not as good as the newer cards, which I'm kind of going to go over when I show you the decks and go over kind of like how they perform and the issues that I ran into. Because if you're looking to come into this game and you just want to play your favorite characters, you could do that. You could have a lot of fun doing it. You could, have a great time going like, you know what, I'm going to place down my favorite character, whether it's like a waifu, a husbando, or whatever it is, right? But you just have to be aware that, like every other card game, you're going to run into people that are just pretty much meta slaves. And what I mean by that is everyone's just going to look up, oh, what's the top deck that, top that, like, YCS or whatever championship series, Springfest or whatever it is. And they're, well, what, anyone have a deck list? Rather than making their own decks, they're just going to copy whatever the top deck is. So you just have to be aware about that, where if you're looking to play a lot of older decks like this Gaia, Fate Zero, or I don't know, like just whatever characters you want, and if it's like older sets or maybe more underpowered sets, like for example, I'm going to show you Mob Psycho, you might not do as good as compared to someone that's just copying like a new list, like I don't know, like Mushoku Tensei or the Hololive decks and whatnot, where you're playing a lot of older cards with very, very vanilla effects that I'm going to show you. And it might feel a little bit on the oppressive side, leaning towards more if you're playing Yu-Gi-Oh, where you feel like your cards are a little bit underpowered, as opposed to a lot of these newer decks. And as I show you my decks, you'll kind of understand why as well too. But overall, I would say that I haven't really ran into any dickheads from playing this game, and it seems like as long as you just let people know in regards to that you're just a new player, then most of the time, if they normally play Japanese decks, they'll normally take out an English deck to play with you, or if they have like certain ideas on how you could have went with a turn or to clarify certain things, they'll take their time to just like teach you, and they wouldn't mind if you play a little bit slower. So don't be afraid to try. But if you're looking to play like a little bit older cards and not as newer sets, it does help to have like friends that also just started a game as well too, where they're also just making decks to have fun, as opposed to someone, putting some kind of like competitive deck together, where you might actually, feel a little bit more comfortable just learning while playing it a lot more casually, which is kind of what I enjoy in this game. All right, so the first deck that I'll go over, and this is the deck that I was most disappointed in, that I ended up abandoning. When you start playing Weiss Schwarz, you'll kind of come into a term where some people call certain things waifu decks. And what that is that regardless of where you play male or female characters, a waifu deck, simply what it means is that you're focusing your deck around a certain character, rather than you just trying to make your deck as meta as possible and sliding in the best cards within the set, regardless of whether you're staying in theme or not, right? But when you're doing that, you're also kind of sacrificing performance, where your deck might not run as optimal as possible. So my idea with this deck was running the level 0 ultimate Esper Kick combo, where I thought it was super hilarious that the card was pretty much just Reagan doing a drop kick on someone. I'm a sucker for anything wrestling, so I was like, damn, wouldn't it be hilarious if you could just Shawn Michaels super kick someone in Weiss Schwarz? And it really didn't turn out to work out as well as I thought it would. Because the problem with this deck is that if I run Ultimate Esper Kick, and then I also run It's Okay to Run Away as a climax combo, it just doesn't mesh that well. The fact that it requires me to pretty much play my mob, which pretty much he's not able to get memory markers in this deck in order to combo with the level 3, which combos with the It's Okay to Run Away. Since I'm running It's Okay to Run Away, it requires the actual mob that you're running to actually get a certain amount of memory markers, and since they're not generating enough to actually use it, it becomes pretty useless. As well as if you're running other mob cards in a deck, like the Mob Psychic Powers, which he's another level 1 combo, but he uses a different climax, which is fulfilling a client request. So in this case, the fact that I was trying to stay within a Reagan theme really didn't mesh that well. Of course, I could go back and kind of brainstorm this and just kind of figure out what I could do better and change out. Most likely, probably I might have to dump Esper Kick or drop the certain mobs, but then I sacrificed the level 3 Reagan combo as well too. So overall, I would say this deck is definitely going into the bench for now until I guess figure out a better way to do it where it's playable. Because when you don't have a lot of good climax combos, the one difference between older decks and newer decks is that with the newer decks, they have really, really, really good level 1 climax combos. And if you're playing a lot of like the older decks where your characters kind of just turn into beaters of Encore, you're not going to be able to keep up, especially with the fact that there's a lot of standby decks where they're playing a lot of early plays, where if you're playing an older deck, you might not have an answer to a lot of these things. The second mob deck that I run is actually the Body Improvement Club, which I absolutely love. And if you've never watched Mob Psycho, I highly recommend it. It's one of the only animes I probably ever would recommend watching something in an English dub. And what the Body Improvement Club is just a bunch of like wholesome guys that just support each other, like a bunch of big muscly dudes. So I highly recommend you checking the anime out. As for how the deck fared, it honestly did not perform that badly. A lot of the deck pretty much just revolves around you playing down the level 3 at the end, which what the level 3 Goda does is that he lets you pretty much mill back cards from your opponent's waiting room with the climax combo, and he becomes almost like a 16k wall with your support characters until pretty much your opponent's next turn. And then, since you're putting back a lot of regular characters into your opponent's deck in their graveyard, whenever you swing, let's just say if you have 3 of these guys out, you're putting back 15 cards into your opponent's deck where you're going to choose like all level 0s and level 1s. So the chances of them canceling the damage that you're going to do is actually a lot lower. And then in this deck, I'm also running the Mob Psychic powers as well too, which lets me play him at the early level as well as use his climax combo. And then, it revolves around the backup card, which you'll pretty much always have in your hand. And pretty much this deck revolves around the fact that whenever you use an act, which could be a backup or you're tapping a character to boost your other characters, it pretty much buffs all your other muscle characters where they're getting extra power based on the fact that you're using an act ability. And that's pretty much the whole deck. It's very, very straightforward. I would say overall, it's a very, very fun deck to play. I can't really blame the fact that it's like an older deck, to be honest, when it comes to, the fact that I'm not doing well with the deck. Maybe I'm just awful at card games, but you know what? I like playing decks that I have fun with and characters that I like. Sue me, right? So I probably just need to put a lot more work into the decks that I play, but I don't really like playing the same deck over and over again, which is why I have multiple decks. So I do recommend checking out Mob Psycho, and if you like the anime, I would say like the great thing I like about Weiss is that a lot of these cards kind of revolve around like the actual theme of the actual anime series. And if you really like a certain anime, you're pretty much playing out the scenes that, you see in the animes itself. I would say out of all my decks, this is one of the very, very fun ones that I truly enjoy. As for whether it's good or not, I really have to see as I play more. I did run into a lot of situations where I bricked a lot. Bricking meaning in my first pretty much like for 3 or 4 turns, I draw into pretty much like 3 or 4 climaxes and all my level 3 characters, and I end up not being even able to play a single character. So, and I pretty much just had to pass my turns. So in my local events, I pretty much went 1-4 in all of my pretty much weeks. And all the games I actually win, I'm either playing against someone just as new as me, or I just pretty much luck out when I win. So I don't really feel like I'm winning because I'm doing good in the game. So I can't really blame that, okay, I'm bricking every time, that's why I'm losing. Perhaps maybe I'm just bad. And if you've been watching this channel, the next deck, you know exactly what it is. I absolutely love the character Gilgamesh, and I actually have 2 decks. I'm going to show you the first one. And this is one of the decks that I'm still working on, and it's one of those things where I guess you would consider a waifu deck where it really doesn't perform that well because the set is from Fate Zero, and Gilgamesh himself is a very, very awkward card to use, and I'm going to explain why. So I built the deck before I started playing the actual game itself, and I ran into a lot of issues. The first thing was that compared to a lot of modern decks, you're not able to do a lot of deck searching, which I kind of resolved by adding Heaven Field 2 cards into the deck, where before I just had like a lot of beaters. Instead, I added Brainstormers into the deck, which lets me search, master and serving characters, which kind of alleviates a lot of issue. But you end up with a lot of old cards that I'm gonna have to replace, like this 8K21 beater, where at level 2, you're paying a 2 cost and taking 2 climaxes from your hand into your waiting room in order to do some useless effect that's not really that good for a vanilla 8K beater, where this is what I mean by there's a lot of power creeping, where a lot of new cards just have way better effects, and you just can't get around it when you're playing an older deck. And then you run into cards like this 3-2 Saber, which I'm looking to replace with the Musashi Sabers, which I actually just picked up one recently, which is these Musashi Knight's Oath Sabers. I have another one coming in because a friend is nice enough to send me one of them. So, you have like very vanilla cards where, this one pretty much just only bounces back to hand, which is a very meh effect. And then you get a Saber card like this where you're able to burn for damage, which is a lot more, I guess, like a modern type of effect, where compared to something vanilla, like just having like a beater card with a very generic effect, you're getting something that actually is somewhat playable and somewhat more useful. The problem I also ran into this deck is that it was very hard to even obtain one more copy of certain cards like Petite Gilgamesh. There's just no one selling them, so I really can't get more of them, so I'm only running 2 of them at the time. I would ideally want to run 3. Of course, I threw in more of these Brainstormers, right, which obviously made the deck work a lot better. But you see like certain level 0 cards where if you want to stay in theme, like I want to just have Gilgameshes in the deck, right? It's a Gilgamesh deck. I even have like Gilgamesh sleeves. I'm getting the Sanrio sleeves soon as well too, where you're just gonna get cards like this where it's just very vanilla, where you're only getting 500 attack power to every Gilgamesh character, where you'll learn as you play Weiss Schwarz more that attack power doesn't really mean much most of the time. I wish I could foil it out and get more of these, SR Gilgameshes, but it just isn't happening. One problem I noticed also too is that with a data deck like this, you have a combo like this, which requires you to have the climax combo, which is his level 2 combo, right? And then it requires you to actually have the climax out. So in essence, he doesn't have a level 1 climax combo. And this requires him to be able to reverse characters. I could pump him up by 4K as you see here, but it requires me to drop a card from my hand, which with an older deck like this where you don't have a lot of drawing power, and you're also don't have a lot of cards to search your deck, you're going to run into the issue where your hand size is just not enough compared to a lot of these newer decks where it's going to make it work, as well as the fact that it's a level 2 combo with only 7,500 with an effect that can be canceled as compared to something a lot more punishing in a lot of these new decks. It's just, if you're looking to just have fun, it's fine, right? But as compared to like, if you want like something like a waifu deck to be competitive, you might have to rethink that. Actually, I wanted to show you guys as well too. I'm actually waiting for more of these sleeves to come in so I can actually swap out these sleeves so I can have like the whole Sanrio thing going on. I honestly think like these sleeves look way better than the actual fake Grand Order sleeves. So there's that. One thing I also want to mention as well too is that his Sword of Rupture Aya Climax is actually just not that great of a climax combo card, where the effect of it lets me draw a card, and all it does is just let me choose one character to get 2k attack and 1 soul, as compared to a lot of different climax combos. You're able to select your characters and give them pretty much all your characters 1k attack and 1 soul instead. Even the yellow climax card, which is Gate of Babylon, it pretty much only gives my whole team 1 soul and no extra attack. And the fact that these cards are from a very, very older set and dated, it just a lot of times isn't able to keep up with a lot of these newer cards to become powerful enough. And then going back to the sort of Aya combo, so the level 3 Gilgamesh is pretty much, his level 3 combo isn't even a level 3 combo. So his level 3 combo is that on your opponent's attack phase, you could drop the Sword of Aya from your hand, but you also have to pay 1 cost, and all it does is pretty much remove your opponent's climax from their climax area and put it into the waiting room. The effect really does let you do certain things like, make them lose the climax effect if it's something that requires it on the actual field itself. But in all the games that I've played, I've never really ran into the time where I'm able to actually drop the Gilgamesh, because aside from stock issues, the fact that I have to be able to search this into my hand is very, very hard. The problem I run into with this deck is that, one, hand size. I don't have enough cards in my hand because I'm always trying to keep up with my opponent, as well as, managing the stock, which I'm not able to generate enough because a lot of these cards just don't stay alive long enough to remain on the field for me to swing to generate that stock. So I'm still working on certain things in order to make the deck, I guess, more workable if I want to continue playing my favorite character, which I'm gonna make this work, so it's not as shit. One change I did make to the deck is dump some of the Gilgameshes for something like these Archer cards, which allows me to pretty much search my waiting room for an Archer, or a Rin, which lets me search, Archer cards include Gilgamesh as well too. So there's that. And then I lowered down certain cards like Endless Blades, where it has, as a level 1, its effect is pretty much you mill the top card of your deck, and then you get 1 soul for all your characters if it's a climax, which is kind of like a very meh effect. So your game pretty much revolves around getting your level 2 combo out and then getting a level 3. Hopefully by swapping out the Musashi Sabers, I'm able to have a better level 3 game. But overall, I would say I still really, 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 really like Gilgamesh as a character, so I do want to make this deck work at some point. It requires me to start sacrificing, I guess, the waifu aspect of it, and having to start leaning towards more of, I guess, making it more efficient while somewhat staying in theme, right? So I guess, like, if I added the level 3 Saber into it, I kind of added the other Archer, Emiya Archer, into it to kind of stay in, the theme that I like, where I kind of like all 3 characters. But yeah, one good news I wanted to say is that I did manage to secure close to a playset now. I have 3 of these King of All Creation Archers, so I could pretty much run them all in my deck, since I downsized these Archers to only 3 of them in my deck, because having 4 of them was kind of useless since the effect itself was not that great, as well as the fact that I found it very rare that I ever even got to play him on the field in the sense that it was useful. So I could end up cracking this open and running it in my deck. I'm still trying to figure out how to do it, and if I even want to run them in my deck, just because I really like the character, I really like the card. So I had to think about it really long and hard. Hopefully, if anything, I could find a third one, and I could just leave this one in there. If I find a third King of All Creation, then it'd be great. I could run 3 of them in my deck, and I really wouldn't mind, since these are not as, higher quality as the one here. But I'm having trouble finding like a good price one, because everyone's trying to sell these for like $500-$600, when honestly it's not really that great of a card, and I'm probably might be one of the only people out there that actually want them or play them in their deck. So yeah, I mean, if anyone finds one roughly around like 200 under, let me know. But yeah, overall, my Fate Zero Archer deck, I would say, after I put in a lot more work into it and swap out a lot of the cards and whilst trying to stay in theme, this one I'm intent on staying in theme. Furthest I'll go is Saber, Rins, and the Emiya Archer. I'm not going to stray further than that. Hopefully I can make it a lot more playable, where it's still fun to play and not absolute dog shit where I'm getting stomped on, and I still able to have fun while letting my opponent have fun playing against it as well too. That is not just like, oh, it might as well just be playing a trial deck. But again, it goes to power scaling, where a lot of these older cards, they're level 3 combos. This isn't even a combo, are just not that great. And if you're looking to play Fate Zero, if I just like Gilgamesh, there's a lot of other decks that are really, really good in Fate Zero. Like if you want to play the Sakura, for example, Sakura is really good. Ilya is actually pretty good. It has good level 3 combos. Other characters are just good. In this case, I guess I just chose like the bottom tier of bottom tier characters. But that's the sacrifice that you make. And for me, I enjoy having fun with the characters that I play rather than just playing whatever's meta. But if you're into Fate Zero, playing things like the Alter Saber, the Saber decks, the Sakura decks, like I mentioned, the Heaven's Field 2 Sakura, the Dark Sakura is actually really, really good. Just be aware if you're looking to play, Fate Zero, there's a lot of like Heaven's Field 1 cards that are kind of pretty pricey that you would consider like more staple type of cards where they might be like $60-$70 just for like a rare or double rare. So just be aware about that. So staying in the theme of Fate Grand Order and Gilgamesh, this is my second Gilgamesh deck, which it's a lot newer Fate Grand Order and it's very, very shiny. I really, really like how a lot of these cards look. I would say overall this Gilgamesh is a 8 gold bar deck where I would say it runs a lot better than the Fate Zero Gilgamesh since it's a lot newer, right? Where I'm able to generate a hand size. Maybe I'm just bad at the game, but I notice a lot of problems. It might also stem in the fact that I'm also running another waifu type deck where, it's just I was running all Gilgamesh cards, which I did swap out to make it run a little bit better, but I haven't really got to play it enough in order for it to be good and get used to it. Maybe it's a lot better than I give it credit for. So previously I was running a Brainstormer from the trial deck, and one thing you have to realize when you're playing Weiss Schwarz is that not all Brainstormers are the same. Previously I was running a Gilgamesh Brainstormer, where every time it brainstormed, if I hit a climax, all it did was allow me to draw a card, which is, you would think drawing a card is really good if you're playing Yu-Gi-Oh! You think Pot of Greed, but it's actually not that great, as opposed to I switched out for an Ishtar, where whenever I hit a climax, I choose one character from my waiting room, which is a lot better than just drawing a card. In this case, I actually get to choose what I want. So there's that. I do need to dump out this Ishtar just because of the fact that I only run like 3 or 4 red cards, and since she's a level 1, I might not actually ever get the opportunity to actually be able to clock specifically a red card or have it in my level zone, so that's something I need to swap out. One thing I would point out also, his level 1 combo is okay. I really wish that the Swirling Sands card actually kept the attack power buff for when he's placed down, as opposed to just on the turn that I place him onto the stage. Where a lot of cards nowadays are more like, oh, as long as it's your turn, or when, or something, some kind of buff that sticks with it rather than just only when it's placed down. And his effect is pretty much just lets me, draw 2 cards and then choose 1 card in my hand and put it into my waiting room, which is okay, but it's not as good as a lot of the newer cards. I am running the Gilgamesh in this card. So the problem I have with this deck is that if I run the level 3 Gilgamesh, his effect is that he taps himself and you pay 2. So you pay 2 to even play him to begin with, and then you pay another 2. So in total, you need to use 4 in order to use his effect. And pretty much what it is, when you have the climax, you could pretty much tap your character, and then it removes the character in front of him, and you do 3 damage one at a time. So it's kind of like him using the Gate of Babylon, which is what they're trying to go for. And then his other effect requires him to put 1 card from your hand to your waiting room, and then it pretty much heals you, which again, it runs into the issue of you have to have a good hand size. The other level 3 I'm running to stay in theme is this Gilgamesh, which is okay. But the fact that I'm staying in theme, I feel like it's actually hindering me. I do also run 1 Kingu in my deck, I guess, just because he's shiny and Kingu is his friend, which is not a bad card. When you reveal a Babylonia character, you get 2k attack power until the end of the return if you reveal the card. And then pretty much when it goes to the waiting room, you look at the top 4 cards of your deck and choose 1 level 1 or higher card from them, reveal to an opponent, and then put the rest into my waiting room. So yeah, like it's pretty good. It's up to 4 cards, but I'm mainly running it to stay in theme. Overall, I would say this deck is, the fact that I'm sticking with mostly Gilgamesh cards in this deck, it could be better. But again, my 2 Gilgamesh decks is because I really, really like the characters. I'm pretty sure if I wanted to have like a meta deck in Babylonia, I could end up running an Ishtar or Ereshkigal deck, but I really don't care for the characters. I do have the Case of Babylonia, which if I get another Gilgamesh, I'll have 2 Gilgameshes, and at that point I only need 2 more for a playset. Originally I wasn't going to run the SPs in the deck, but they just look very, very, very nice. So yeah, that's pretty much my Gilgamesh deck. I would say out of all of them, right now, I would say like at the bottom tier would probably be my Reagan deck, and then above that would be my Fate Zero deck. Above that would be my Body Improvement deck, which And then I would say the most modern deck would be the case that I open, which is gonna be my Camelot deck, which I'm gonna show you right now. And the next deck I'll go over is my Lion King deck, and I'm picked out some of these cards just to show you why a lot of these newer decks are just way better than a lot of the older decks that you'll play, like Fate Zero and Mob Psycho, for example, right? Let's just compare this to Fate Zero, for example. So I have the Climax here pretty much, and let me find the other Climax as well too. Remember when I showed you the Fate Zero one where pretty much when you trigger the Climax, it does absolutely jack squat, and pretty much it only requires me to play the card down in order to get the effect, and you don't even get a trigger effect. I mean, of course, like that deck was a double soul trigger, which most of them are kind of like that, but with modern cards, you'll notice you're getting 1k 1 soul as opposed to the yellow Climax of Gate of Babylon, where you're only getting 1 soul and some lame effect like add stock or some bullshit like that, where you're getting 1k 1 soul when you play it down, as well as when you actually trigger it when you attack. You get things like take a character in your waiting room, return to your hand, you get to add cards to your stock or add it to your hand. So you have a lot more options when you play cards like this, right? By the way, I really, really love my sleeves, which is why I kind of really like the Lion King deck, and you can tell that I end up foiling it out as well too. And the other thing you'll notice is that with modern cards, you'll have things such as early play Mordred, where if you have an opponent with a level 3 or higher character, you get to place it down, and you have all these effects, like it gets extra attack if you have the Lion King in the back row, and when you place the card down, you get the heal as well too. You know, you have the Bedivere. Remember when I complained about the Babylonia combo where it was just kind of meh? Where you're getting a level 1 combo. My Fate Zero doesn't even have a level 1 combo, where you're getting 1k attack power passive, and then you're getting to draw 2 cards from your deck, and then, you know, pretty much you mill it, and then you end up ending to choose a card from your waiting room to put it back into your hand, as well as you get another 2k attack power. You don't get that with like a dated deck. You get cards like the level 3 Lion King. Remember how I said the level 3 card pretty much for my Fate Grand Order and my Fate Zero deck was not that great? With the Lion King, you get a passive attack power, so it's 11k. And then if you play the level 2 one, which lets you play your level 3 Lion King at level 2, rather than waiting to level 3, you also get another 2k attack power. So by default, she's pretty much at 13k. On top of the fact that you could get a effect without even having the Climax combo, you're able to burn your opponent. On top of that, you even get a Climax combo to heal yourself, where this is what I mean by power scaling, right? You could play and have fun with your older decks, but if you're looking to just, you know, be a little bit more competitive, a lot of older cards just don't have as much effects as these newer cards, where every single card has like a whole paragraph on top of it, where a lot of the older cards are just very, very vanilla, where it just has one basic effect, and that one basic effect might not even be that great. Every card in a lot of these like newer sets, you're able to pretty much just mill through your whole deck, search your deck for what you need, and you have a lot of options when you play. So that's something to consider when you're playing an old deck compared to a new deck. Even things like searching out climaxes, swapping climaxes, you just have so many options when it comes to a lot of these new decks. By the way, yes, I do run the SPs in my deck. I just really, really like the cards, and the fact that I don't think I'll ever plan to sell my cards. But I just want you to be aware about this. As for my performance with this deck so far, as much as I made it very, very shiny and add a lot of the round table rares into this, like the Mordred, I added the Tristan, for example. As shiny as I has made it, the performance, I haven't been really doing that great on it. I would say, like, I've seen a lot of people do very, very well with the Lion King deck. I would say maybe I just need more games with it because at the moment I'm still unsure what to search. A lot of mistakes I'm making, like I brainstorm too much and things like that. I'm not really sure like what I want in my hand. I guess that just comes with playing the game more, because previously I also didn't use a lot of the Bedivere level 1 combos in my game, which I'm kind of fixing a little bit more. And then, building your hand towards playing the level 3 Lion King as well too. But I would say overall the deck is way better than all my older decks, way better than a Mob Psycho deck. The body improvement deck I think does stand a chance as long as I know how to play it well. But I'm very, very adamant about getting my Gilgamesh decks down just because I really like the character. But as for like all my decks, I would say probably the Lion King deck has the best chance when it comes to going against a lot of these modern decks. A special side note that I forgot to mention, what I mean by certain cards are very, very oppressive when you play older decks, is when you look at certain Hololive cards like this, where it's an early drop where it's a level 2, while in your hand if you have 4 more Hololive characters, as well as when you drop it from the stage, and if you reveal your top card of your deck and it's a Hololive character, you choose one level 3 or lower character from your opponent's stage and put it at the bottom of their deck. So you have effects like this where if you're playing certain decks that might not be as newer, and then it combos with a lot of other things in their deck, it could end up feeling very, very oppressive, like a game like Yu-Gi-Oh! And it could be very unfun if you're playing a lot of these older decks, if you're just looking to have fun with them. So just be aware about that. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you guys for watching. I just thought this might have been a fun topic to talk about, as well as people have been asking me what kind of decks I play, as well as how to get like webcam games going and whatnot. But I would say if you're just looking to start off the game, what I really, really recommend is just don't bother asking for what's the top deck. Don't bother copying whatever is like, the top decks at Springfest or whatever it is. Make your own deck, have fun, because I honestly feel like at the core of this, we're not teenagers, right? We're not looking to aspire to become world champions or whatnot. Maybe you are, who knows? But I would say at the core of it, the best part about this game is just being able to play your favorite characters. Like for me, like I really love Fate. I really like Gilgamesh, and I really, really like the new Lion King character as well too. So I really like playing my Gilgamesh deck. As horrible as it is, I like playing it, and to me that's really fun, as opposed to me just copying someone else's deck and just playing whatever is the best deck out there. But yeah, I hope that by me making these videos, the tutorial video, talking about how to collect the cards, how to make the decks, how to play the game, that I'm also able to just put it out there that, the game is really fun, and I hope a lot of other people just give it a chance. Whether if you can't find people to play it locally, physically, you can still have the physical cards and you're able to play it online through webcam, and you just have as great of an experience as you could, even if you were playing in person, especially with the fact that, there's really just not that many, actual play groups out there. One other thing I also noticed is that a lot of these older Weiss play groups might be very, very closed off, which is why you might not find these groups, because they might only meet only when, they know the other guys are showing up. So that's just something to be aware about. And I'm sure like there's also local groups for you to look for. They might have a Discord on Facebook, so you might want to just check that out as well too. But don't be afraid to maybe start your own groups out there as well, because I really think that aside from all the minor gripes I have, like the JP stuff and whatnot, I really think the game is very fun and very, very casual friendly and very easy to pick up as long as you have people to play with. And I find that a lot of people online, when you play on webcam, if you're a new player, they're also willing to help you out and teach you as well too. So, just give it a try, get a trial deck, and, just have fun and rep your favorite characters. Don't worry about what's meta or what's good. Because I see so many people just focused on asking like, oh, how should I do my deck? How should I make it the best? Whereas I feel like as horrible as some of my decks are, I play it and then I end up fixing it based on, options I see better. I feel like you have a lot more fun that way, because at the end of the day, you're able to choose from all these series, and the series that you end up choosing is because it's characters that you like. And I think that's the best part about card games like this and hobbies like this, because you're just enjoying the things that you personally enjoy, as opposed to just choosing what other people are choosing. But yeah, thank you for watching as always. I hope you have a great day.